Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're taking a really structured look at the hidden mechanics of our relationships. Specifically, we're examining a concept that quietly dictates how millions of us interact, how we love, and honestly, how we view ourselves. We're exploring the traits of codependence, and we're drawing directly from Thomas Alethia's incredibly comprehensive guide, 12 Steps to a Good Life. We're going to break down a very granular, diagnostic checklist of behaviors, things that reveal a deep and often completely hidden emotional reliance on other people. So right out of the gate, I want to ask you something directly from the source's checklist. Do you value other people's approval over your own? I want you to treat this explainer as an interactive self-assessment. As we go through this, ask yourself how often you bend, compromise, or just completely abandon your own needs just to keep someone else happy or to get their validation. And look, if that question makes you squirm even a little bit, you're in exactly the right place. Let's start by laying down a clear clinical foundation. Codependency is defined as an unhealthy reliance on others for your sense of identity and self-worth. Basically, it's a state where your internal compass has been completely hijacked by the external world. Instead of getting your self-esteem from within, your entire sense of being okay is outsourced to the people around you. It strips away your independent sense of self, leaving you constantly scanning the room just to figure out who you need to be in that specific moment. All right, Section 1, the validation addiction. To truly grasp how this operates in our daily lives, we have to recognize that this reliance functions almost exactly like a behavioral addiction. Our source material points out a fascinating parallel here. The drug of choice is validation and approval from other people. When you don't get that external validation, the result isn't just, mild disappointment. A lack of approval can trigger severe anxiety, sudden anger, and deep depression. It is remarkably similar to the withdrawal symptoms someone experiences when trying to kick a chemical substance. You become physically and emotionally dependent on a steady supply of other people's approval. There's a quote in our source text from an AA member named Tim that just hits the nail on the head. He says, "I wish I didn't have to build my box of okayness by what other people thought of me." That brings such an authentic, empathetic voice to this whole thing, doesn't it? It reminds us that these behaviors don't come out of nowhere. They usually stem from childhood trauma, family dysfunction, or neglect. Nobody chooses to be codependent. People develop these coping mechanisms out of a desperate need to survive and just feel safe when they're young.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Codependence Checklist.
Let's get into the diagnostic deep dive. Listen closely to these granular traits and see if any resonate. We begin with the internal symptoms, the silent battles. A codependent person constantly judges their own thoughts as never good enough. They minimize or flat out deny their true feelings. In fact, they're often super embarrassed to receive any kind of recognition, praise, or gifts. And maybe the most damaging part, they will eagerly compromise their own values just to avoid someone else's rejection or anger. Just let the weight of that constant self-minimization sink in for a second. It is exhausting to live in a state where you are literally terrified to express a differing viewpoint. Now we move outward to the relational symptoms. You might put aside your personal interests just to do what others want. But it goes deeper. It evolves into believing others just can't care for themselves, so you freely offer unasked for advice and actually attempt to convince others what they should feel. So the crucial point here is, what looks like being a selfless caretaker is actually a mask. It's a mask for a deep need to control your environment and the people in it. And that is exactly why you become so resentful when someone refuses your offers of help. Finally, we have to explore the intimacy symptoms. And these are some of the heaviest traits on the checklist. A codependent person is extremely loyal, often remaining in deeply harmful situations way too long. They lavish gifts and favors not out of genuine generosity, but to actively secure affection. And clinically speaking, there's a really tragic confusion around physical intimacy here. The text explicitly points out that codependents will use sex just to gain approval, and they'll accept sex as a substitute for actual love. It's a profound miscalibration of what true emotional connection is supposed to look like. Moving on to Section 3, red flags in relationships. When we take all these checklist traits, the internal minimization, the controlling caretaking, the distorted intimacy, and apply them to our bonds, they manifest as massive toxic cycles. Dennis, another AA member from the source text, summarized this perfectly. He said, "The only thing all my failed relationships had in common was that I was in them." Now, we're not saying this to make you feel bad. It's here to encourage some compassionate self-reflection. It's so easy to point the finger and blame our partners for toxic cycles. But if we're constantly seeking out people who need fixing just so we can feel valuable, Well, we're actively participating in creating that toxic environment. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast it shows between a codependent urge and a healthy boundary. The urge is to sacrifice your personal needs to fix and please others for external validation. The healthy boundary, on the other hand, is deriving your self-esteem entirely from within yourself. The source text has a brilliant, simple rule for this. Validation is approval from others, self-esteem is approval from yourself. Never sacrifice your self-esteem to gain validation.
Which brings us to section 4, steps to recover.
Okay, if the first half of this explainer felt a bit heavy, take a deep breath. We are shifting right now from the diagnostic problem phase into the solution phase. And the really incredible news is that because these behaviors were learned as survival mechanisms, they can absolutely be unlearned. Here's the clear, actionable roadmap to healing derived straight from our source material. Step 1 is understanding your codependence, which, hey, you're doing right now. Step 2 is intentionally boosting your self-esteem. Step 3 is setting healthy boundaries. And step 4 is actively releasing your need for control over others. Let's move to the next part and see how this builds into specific daily actions. You've got to start journaling your true needs and emotions to surface those recurring themes you've been hiding from. You need to practice daily affirmations and gratitude to build that internal validation. You must formally acknowledge to yourself that you cannot fix or control another human being, and you have to stop using avoidance strategies, like isolating yourself, overworking, or just numbing out, so you can finally face your difficult emotions head-on. A massive part of this healing action is setting boundaries, which is essentially transitioning away from the automatic yes of the people-pleasing mindset. You've got to examine your motives. Ask yourself, am I helping because I actually want to, or because I need them to like me? You have to assert your values, learn the absolute superpower of the word no, and actively protect your emotional and physical space. And finally, section 5, reclaiming your authentic self. So, why are we doing all this hard work? The inventory, the boundaries, the unlearning. We're doing it to achieve a profound psychological shift. You are moving away from a fragmented self, one born from enmeshment and childhood trauma, where your emotional well-being is constantly tied to the unpredictable mood of someone else. Instead, you're journeying toward an authentic self, where your emotional well-being is firmly anchored in true self-love, self-acceptance, and genuine autonomy. As you do this work, please remember to celebrate the small breakthroughs. If you manage to say no to a request that usually drains you, celebrate it. If you catch yourself trying to fix someone and you actively step back, celebrate that too. Reclaiming your authenticity is a gradual journey. It is not an overnight magic transformation. So above all, be patient with yourself. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you ready to stop fixing others and start nurturing your authentic self? The tools are all right here. The checklist has shown you the patterns. Now, the choice is completely yours. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll see you next time.